It's on the meeting agenda, right?
Yeah. But there's a meeting on.
I typed in my password.
Sabrina doesn't want to, but she's really good at that.
How am I now? Okay, why won't you go away? Go away. I can do the purpose statement. Okay. Oh, on. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 7th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Second. Moved by Smith, seconded by Winfrey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Winfrey, would you please read our purpose statement? Yes. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. Thank you. And the first item on our agenda this evening is our COVID-19 update. We'll turn it over to Dr. Kathy Arnold.
Good evening, board.
Good evening.
To start on our first slide, Story County remains at a high level of community transmission. The most recent CDC numbers at the time I prepared the report are as follows. Continuing at a high community spread with 682.68 total new cases per 100,000 persons in the past 7 days, which represents about a 329 case decrease from the report at our previous board meeting. Our 7-day positivity is 24.35, which is another decrease about 10% over the report 2 weeks ago. Additionally, as of the last IDPH report, 15% of the new cases in Story County are in those 0 to 17 years of age, down 4% from the previous report, but 40% of the cases in that time period were in the 18 to 29-year-old age group. The graphs you see below include data up through January 31st. Good news there, as you can see on the graph, it's continuing to trend down, matching those predictions of the end of that surge in the next few weeks. Currently, 62.1% of Story County residents are fully vaccinated, about a 0.5% increase from the previous report, which continues to hold. About every 2 weeks, we're seeing about that amount. An additional 5.4% are partially vaccinated, and that has been consistent as well. It doesn't seem to be any movement there. 54.5% of fully vaccinated Story County residents have received a booster, and of those 18 years and older, 58.8% have received a booster. Just a note before I move on to the next slide, the data that on this slide I will not be able to provide in the same manner in 2 weeks. As of February 16th, the Iowa Coronavirus Data website is being decommissioned, and that's where the information that produces the graphs comes from. The graphs are available through the CDC, but they're going to look and function a little differently. So just giving you a heads up that things may look different in the future with a lack of access to that data. The next slide includes our student and staff data. At the time the report was prepared, we had 19 students and 6 staff members who are currently out positive for COVID-19, down from our previous report of 47 students and 9 staff positive for COVID. So that's also trending in a good direction. We've had 691 total students positive this school year, with 491 of those reported since winter break, and 144 staff members positive this year and 106 since winter break. And then on the last slide, you'll see an update to our masking policies as a district. On January 25th, the 8th District Court ruled on the previous injunction on enforcement of the mask mandate ban. How many negatives in there gets confusing, but that was too broad. As a result of that ruling, and upon advice from our legal counsel, as of January 26th, we no longer have a district-wide mask mandate. However, the ruling did state that masks could be included as an accommodation to allow students with disabilities to attend school. So we do have a process for mask requirements and other accommodations to be implemented as needed upon request to allow students who have a medical condition or disability that makes them more vulnerable for complications from COVID-19. And the purpose of those accommodations is to allow those students to attend in-person school. It is a building-based process starting with the principal. Part of that process includes a recommendation for specific accommodations from the student's medical provider based on the child's disability or medical condition. Implementation of the accommodation is based upon individualized student needs, and that process is in alignment with other district requests for accommodation based on other individualized student needs. That completes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Arnold, hypothetically, if there was a student who had that exception, was in a class of 20, 25, would there be an occasion where the rest of the class would all mask for that individual?
And so what we would do is we would request the physician to give a recommendation, and if a physician had that recommendation, we would have to see how that could be implemented. It may be voluntary if that's what the physician requests, please request other students to wear masks. If it were required, then we would, we have to negotiate how that would work.
Okay,
But yes.
thanks.
I have a question. I know it kind of came all of a sudden, the change. Have we been able to make accommodations for all of those students that are needing them? My worry is whether our students are able to be safely in school, given kind of the quick change of things. How are we doing with that?
I do know that we have the process out there. I'm aware of at least one situation where that has happened, where we have made some accommodations that I can't speak directly to each one because I get into some FERPA issues with that, but that is something that we are working through. It's also looking at, for some of this is making sure that those kids are able to be in school and making sure that we can accommodate that. We have to also remember that we started the school year without a mask mandate. So trying to figure out what, we did have some students that were not able to come then and trying to balance that as well. So it's really looking at that on an individualized student basis and seeing what that implication is.
Thanks. So are there students whose parents have requested accommodations where that has not yet been resolved, or
Not that I'm aware of.
not that you're aware of?
But again, it's a building-based process.
I
So
understand.
it does not run through me or through the district office.
So that means that it would not be something that you would necessarily know.
I would be kept in the loop on that, but I have not heard of any that were has there
Okay.
been any rejections or denials of that?
Okay. But the accommodation process typically takes a while to figure all of this out, right? So it might
Right.
take
It may,
few
I
weeks.
mean,
several weeks.
it may take a while. It takes, the physician documentation. It may take an IEP or a 504 team meeting.
Right.
But yeah.
I think this might be more a question for Paula. How have we been doing as far as staffing? Have we had district office needing to back support any buildings lately, or any risks there?
At the risk of jinxing the trend that we're going on, we celebrated, I think, our 9th day last week. Of course, today we didn't have school, where there was no need for support from the district office. So we think that trend is very much on the positive direction. Have heard some comments from building administrators. I feel like they've kind of turned a corner on that, but every time we say that, we get a new opportunity with this pandemic. So I say that very cautiously, but it's been going in a very good direction.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Arnold. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is our discussion items, and we'll start with our board committee update. I think almost every committee met this cycle, so we'll have quite a few updates. So we'll begin with the mental health committee. And we did meet on January 24th. It was a fairly brief meeting where the topic of discussion for that meeting was expanding the membership of the committee. So those individuals that would be a permanent part of the committee. We do plan to have opportunities for getting other folks involved from across the community. So whether it's staff or whether it's professionals, or we've been approached by the city and the mayor and working with them on some mental health initiatives. So those opportunities will come in the future. This was really just looking at permanent members of the committee. And we decided as a group that we thought no more than 2 or 3 additional committee members would be the best number to keep things efficient and running effectively. So we did reach out and invite 2 school counselors, 1 elementary, 1 secondary, and then 1 mental health provider from the community who works in our schools to join the committee as permanent members. So,
and then representatives from the city would come in at some later date.
Or we would have some collaboration with them at a later date. Not that they would join as permanent members of the committee, but working together to maybe have like a community-wide task force where we're addressing some of these things, or working together on trainings that we can put together with the city that would be available for the community. So to have that additional support from outside groups.
Okay.
Any questions for mental health committee?
So this was this was your second meeting that you've?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, it's really just in the beginning organizational stages.
It's very new. Yes,
Okay.
very much in the organizational stages, trying to figure out what our role is and what exactly we want to address.
Mm-hmm. And have you started figuring out what it is that you want to address?
I think we're hoping, especially with the involvement of the school counselors, that they're kind of the ones on the front line.
Okay.
One of the things that we talked about at our first meeting was that the district did do the mental health screener last year, but at that time it was decided not to collect any data from that screener. And so we have 0 data. We don't know how many, we don't have any data from that screener at all in terms of determining a need. And that's something we would like to have, but we also recognize that even if we can't quantify the need, there is a need. So wanting to get some data about what that need looks like, but also at the same time starting to work on what are steps we can take now. So we want to be able to take steps now while also figuring out kind of a more long-term plan.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
No, you're about to
You're
talk
waiting for
about
me
it
for SIAC too? Okay.
You were transitioning really well there.
It is actually a good transition. So I'm giving the SIAC update as well. That's the next committee that met, and SIAC met on the 31st.
What does SIAC stand
I'm sorry, thank you. SIAC is the School Improvement Advisory Committee. It's comprised of members from the district office staff, and then each building has both administrator and teacher, as well as parent representatives. And then the high school and middle school have student representatives as well. And there are a couple of just outside community representatives. So it's a fairly encompassing group. It's something that's required under statute for us to have. The topic that was identified for this meeting was mental health. And so we talked a lot about what is happening in the district right now in terms of mental health. We talked a little bit about the mental health board subcommittee and what the board subcommittee is working on right now. We talked about the mental health screener that the district is working on, which was done last year and is getting ready to be done again. That will be optional for students in 3rd through 12th grade whose parents give consent to participate. So just so the community is aware, that is an active consent process where families opt in to the survey. You don't have to opt out. We talked about the importance of communicating to parents about that and how we really want to give clear messages on what the purpose is, who's going to utilize that information, what services can we provide for students, and then what services can we provide after that. Understanding that there is a shortage of mental health counselors in the community currently. What can we provide for families based on the results of the screening? We talked about current access and support that's available for students and staff in the district. We received an update from the district on the social emotional learning curriculum ruler that was approved by the board, I believe in the spring, maybe it was spring? Okay. And that the rollout for that will be happening fairly soon here. So it is a program that helps students and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, to set and achieve positive goals, and to feel and show empathy for others. while establishing and maintaining positive relationships and making responsible decisions. We also talked about the Panorama survey, and we reviewed data related to sense of belonging from both students and staff at the different buildings throughout the district. And then we gathered feedback for suggestions on next steps in the work to support student and staff mental health needs. Any questions about SIAC or anything that I missed, Kelly or Alan or Jeff?
Nope.
Could I ask a question about the student mental health screener? I mean, from my perspective as a parent. So let's say that I agree to have my child do the student mental health screener, which sounds like a wonderful idea. And I think, I mean, it's great that we're doing this. What happens, let's say my child looks to have signs of depression. What happens with that information?
Do you want me to give a shot or you want to go ahead and answer, Dr. Hawkins?
So, oh, there we go. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
So students will have the opportunity, well, not have the opportunity, students who participate in the screener will have a post-screener conversation. And so in every building, we'll have some school counselors available, as well as licensed social workers and mental health therapists to be able to have a conversation that would include contacting a parent to be able to make sure that they're understanding of the results, and then potentially, setting up opportunities for intervention or work after that meeting.
Okay. Thank you. I think this is great.
All right. Then moving on, our next committee update will be our teaching and learning.
Good evening. So the Teaching and Learning Committee met on February 1st, and we had a pretty short agenda. The first discussion was a presentation from Dr. Jones regarding the equity plan, educational equity plan, and he gave us an update on the meetings that occurred in January with the community stakeholders, and he talked about the theories that were discussed and how they went about discussing them. And then that there's 2 additional sessions that are scheduled for February to talk about theories 3 and 4, and also a discussion of instructional practices and mindset. It was a pretty robust conversation where conversations and questions related to the equity plan in terms of goals, such as reading goals and whether or not math would be included. The Teaching and Learning Committee is going to work on helping to update a policy that involves curriculum, which includes having defining what curriculum is within the Ames Community School District. We didn't get to that in our last meeting, so we're hoping that everyone will come prepared at our next meeting, having done the reading, so that we can have some discussion on that and move in that direction. Any questions, or did I miss anything?
All right. Facilities Committee.
Facilities Committee met, as always, a lot of this comes up through later stuff related to high school construction project. 2 things I wanted to point out: the hydronics system update. Sounds like that's now getting much more well understood, and probably will not end up with the scope that was worried, but we'll still get an update for that over the next month here or so, but that was good. The one thing I did want to point out is, this is great news. Basically, now that we're entering the later part of the project, the staff has been working on the furnishings and fixtures and equipment for the high school. So basically the things that need to be inside the building. As we discussed kind of at the beginning of the high school project, way back a long time ago, when we got to this point, we'd look at the contingency amount. There'd been 4% contingency in the budget reserved for problems that came up, and see whether that contingency could be used to kind of bring more things into the project earlier. Well, we've gotten to that point now, and the district in the meeting was asking about spending about $500,000 of the remaining contingency to get ahead of some furniture procurements based upon staff feedback, some supply chain issues, and just inflation. We were all really supportive of that because basically the more we can do to have the building ready to go when staff gets in, the better. And also it seemed reasonable because looking at it, there's greater than 10% contingency remaining for the remaining work on the project because the project's been doing really well. So staff was going to start moving forward on that. If any of that gets put into the project, it'll come through as change orders. If not, it's just like all the other FF&E stuff, that it's really just purchased out of the budget as planned. So we'll continue to hear more of that, and we're trying to track that contingency amount and what we can do with that to help make sure the high school opens as good a condition as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on anything in the facilities update?
And policy committee. The policy committee met last Wednesday, February 2nd. Most of the work we did was on updating the policy according to IASB recommendations. There are a couple of policies that when we get to the discussion, kind of previewing, I guess, but they are recommended to be rescinded based on kind of redundancy with other new policies. We did talk a little bit about the policy on volunteering to make sure that that was clear what those procedures should be. And I see that the language was updated to a volunteering page so that we can direct people to the appropriate procedures. And the board also asked for some guidance on whether a board policy or some other method to provide support and procedures for staff that were receiving harassing emails from community members, to make sure that we are providing them with the support they need. Did I miss anything? Okay. No, sounds good. Questions?
I was going to talk about equity committee.
Oh, we don't have equity committee on here.
We don't have it, but I just want to give the board members a heads up. We are meeting this week, and one of the topics that Dr. Jones is going to be bringing to the committee is that as part of the planning that's being put forward, there's going to be a push for defining educational equity as it relates to Ames. We as a committee, when we had talked about having that for this meeting, really wanted to try to bring that to the board as soon as possible. So kind of this is a heads up to the rest of the board members that you'll be involved in that too. I don't know if it'll be the next board meeting or one after that, but we want to bring that to kind of some sort of format, whether a discussion or a work session, so that we really can all get behind and understanding what is educational equity in the district, how are we talking about, have common messaging and understanding.
Any other comments or questions on board committee updates? And do we have any comments from the public on our board committee updates? All right, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is our 2022-2023 board meeting schedule and agenda setting rotation. So this is just kind of a list of what is planned currently for 2022 to 2023. If anyone sees any potential issues, or if you have dates that you know you won't be available, we can make some switches there. Any comments or questions on the board meeting schedule?
I guess maybe a request I'd have, knowing that Dr. Lawson will be starting July 1st, I would anticipate we might have another work session in July, like he might want something about planning. I would like to see if we could get that on the calendar sooner rather than later because of summer vacations.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past, what we've always found is because of the way sports and things work, they're really like that last week of July, first week of August, trying to keep that empty. So I don't know if maybe we move up the board meeting in July a little bit so we could fit 2 in there if Dr. Lawson needed them. But that's just the one thing I had noticed.
Yeah. That's a great observation. Thanks. Okay. Any comments from the public on the 2022-2023 board meeting schedule? All right. We will move on to our policies for discussion. And Kelly, do you want to give an overview or do you want me to give an overview?
I'd say the first one of all of these, if I am not mistaken, were just really updates based on IASB recommendations. We didn't really have any issues, and when we discussed it in committee, I think the only question we had was some of the language about volunteering, which there's now a link to more information.
Yep,
I would just want to add.
Nope, it's, yep.
Nothing that's like a major change in policy, so.
No, pretty much based on IASB recommendations, so. Any questions on the policies?
Yeah, one comment for Director Winfrey. I read through all the policies, and number 6, the public conduct on school premises. I'm wondering if there were teachers who were gossiping, slandering some other teacher, would there be a way to include in that policy a recommendation that anybody witnessing that kind of activity would report that? I don't see that. I see the other issues in that.
If it was,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Vincent, but that would be an employee handbook thing, right? Because it would be employees, so not board policy.
Yes.
Okay, so even though it's under public conduct on school premises, and that speaks about conducting oneself with dignity, and I'm pulling it up again here just so I can get it correct. Employees and visitors will treat each other with dignity, engage in responsible behavior, exercise self-discipline. So that wouldn't be part of the policy, just part of the handbook. Is that what you're saying?
I'll let Paula take
Okay.
it.
Yeah, and I will certainly ask our HR director to just chime in here. With our public policies, even though, when we go into public as an employee, someone could raise a concern or a question or follow up, but we have specific procedures if it's a staff member that might overhear that for a complaint about a fellow staff member. And generally, we encourage procedures much like many organizations, I think, would. If you have a concern and you are able, it's always best to have that conversation privately, directly with the individual. If you don't think that resolves it, to have the conversation, if I'm an employee, with my direct supervisor and get guidance and go through the typical protocols within the system. But there would be, someone could raise a concern under this policy, but if it's a staff member seeing a colleague acting in a way that raises concern, we'd encourage them to follow our staff procedures that are outlined in their handbook.
Okay. Good. Thank
Look
you.
at the director.
This might be covered in the 400 series as well, right?
It would be, yes, there are specific guidelines there. And then, of course, all of us as employees have professional codes of ethics as well.
There are also policies, employment policies against bullying and harassment, as well as, that apply to employees as well as students. And that's in the 400 series. And that would be, it's different from public conduct. So this is about public conduct on public premises. But I think the kind of thing that maybe you're referring to is something that isn't necessarily fall under the definition of public conduct,
Right.
but it's something that may fall within the definition of harassment or even being unprofessional toward each other. There are also ethical rules that teachers follow or that are required to follow about being professional with each other. And we also, try to do our best to create a professional work environment. And so all of those things go in together with what Dr. Vincent had said, trying to resolve things like that at the earliest possible time at the lowest possible level, and then a process that we have in place to go to the next if it doesn't get resolved.
So there being a particular distinction between those kind of activities that we just talked about and public discourse or public conduct.
I would draw a line there. I would draw the line between this policy that we were talking about that's before the board, which is public conduct on school premises, and being different from employee talking to each other, gossiping, the kind of thing that you were talking about.
Okay, that's helpful distinction. Thank you all.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add to that is, that kind of similar to how our role as a board is to stay at that 10,000-foot level. The policies are at the really broad level, and they also are accompanied by administrative rules that get into more of the specifics that are more related to staff actions. And so, you know, the policy is always going to be more broad, but there may be more specific things that come out in the administrative rules.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments on the board policies for discussion?
Does the fact we're in the 900 series mean we're getting close?
I don't think so. That's my interpretation.
I wish it were true.
Okay. I try.
It's going in order of importance, am I correct? Or the ones that are the most out of date?
We had more than perhaps we had hoped for that needed to be updated. And so as quickly as we can get to them, along with if there's a particular urgency, but they aren't going in a sequential numerical order.
You tricked me. Okay.
So how many do we have remaining?
That's a great question. I could get back to you. I don't know.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I
But
don't
like,
know.
I mean,
Well,
a lot. The answer is a lot.
a lot, and then of course, as soon as you finish, you start over again, right? It's a
Okay.
cycle, and they have to be reviewed.
We're trying to put them in a 4-year cycle, and
Okay.
historically, they were likely in a 5-year cycle, so that's a little bit of this. And as we get through, one task that the committee will be asked to do as we finish this year is reprioritize so that you get it a little more balanced across years, and also the thought of you will get through the entire sequence within one of your terms, and then start again.
Fun.
All right, any comments from the public on our policies for discussion? Okay, then I will go ahead and open our public forum, and I'll read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we do not have anyone signed up to speak as part of our public forum. So I will go ahead and close the public forum, and we will move on to our consent items, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of the consent items.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Winfrey. Superintendent Vincent, gifts to the district.
This is a first. We have a few in the works, but none to present this evening.
Okay. All right, so it was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Winfrey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Board and staff items. We'll start with items from the board. I don't have any requests for staff written down this evening. Do we have other items from the board? I just want to congratulate all of our students who participated in the state speech contest this past weekend, and thank the teachers who devote their time and energy into making those efforts successful. It sounds like it was a really excellent event this year, so thank you to all of you for participating. All right, items from the superintendent.
I would just also like to acknowledge the hard work of staff today and professional development. Many groups scattered around the district, and how nice to have that time. Also, would just anecdotally say, we are happy to see perhaps a shift in the COVID numbers, and the health of our staff and students seems to be improving. We'll hope to continue on that. We think anecdotally some of the extra planning time. We are also hearing comments of appreciation from staff. Dr. Hawkins was just sharing with me the notion of 25 minutes doesn't sound like much, but when you put that against the end of the day, we are getting some of that planning and professional collaboration that we so hope for. So we'll try to think of a way that we might get some actual data around that more than just the anecdotal comments, but we are pleased to be hearing the positive reports at this time.
All right, moving on to the board planning calendar. We do have a work session following this meeting. And then we will have another regular meeting and work session on the 21st. We will have the demographer coming on the 21st to give us their report. And then the rest of the meetings are laid out here. Any comments or questions on the board planning calendar? Okay. We will go ahead and move into our work session. And just for members of our public, we will reorganize ourselves for that work session. And we will end our live stream at this time as well.
So Catherine, in about 5 minutes.
Yes, we'll take a 5-minute recess and